Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy and it's Q&A time again. So let's have a look at what questions you've all been sending in. And thank you for sending in questions. We do love it. This is a roundup of a lot of questions that we hadn't actually got there to. So there's some from slightly older, not that long ago, but we just hadn't collected them. I love propagating. However, I'm always a little concerned I'm propagating patented varieties. Any idea and where I can find if the varieties are patented? If I'm not sure, I don't like sharing them around. That is really a good thing to do, and you are being very good at looking at whether or not these are patented varieties. One thing to do is make a note when you buy a plant. The labels will always say whether they are patented, they've got a copyright, they've got a PBR or a PVR on them. Somewhere on that label it will say that. So that's one thing to do. If you haven't got a label, you can Google search the particular plant and you should find in there somewhere along the line breeder's name or what have you and whether it's got it. Otherwise, here in the UK, a very good source is going to the RHS Plant Finder, and they will normally say at the end whether or not it has got it, but they can even miss it as well. You can though then go on to the bodies that actually give out the patents, but that's very long-winded, so it's better to be on the cautious side. And if you're not sure, or the next time you go to a garden centre or somewhere like that, have a look at the labels and then you'll be able to find out. I hope that helps you. So if you are interested in propagating, then we have launched a course of propagation, which once you have it, you will then be able to go back to refer to it and keep on going. So you keep it for basically ever. Now we put that on at a promotional price, really basically for our long-time subscribers to be able to get the course at a slightly cheaper price. And I'm sorry to say, but at the end of August, that launch price is then going to stop and it is going to go to the correct pricing. So it will then be a little bit more expensive. So get in if you're really wanting to before the launch price finishes and get it at that cheaper rate. Any advice on getting rid of spotted spurge? Came over from a neighbour's house about 5 years ago and it's a losing battle so far. Victoria, BC, zone 8B. Okay, so this is a little euphorbia. It's ground hugging. It's called the spotted spurge because it's got these dark marks on its leaves. And what you don't realise, this is one of those ones which is called an ephemeral weed. And ephemeral weeds can produce lots of flower, lots of seed all of the time. Its one mission in life is to reproduce. It's a little bit like rabbits. So basically, you have got to cut off growth as soon as you see it, as soon as you see seedlings, pull them out. It's the easiest way to eradicate it. It is going to just keep on seeding. So if you see a whole mass of seedlings coming up, get them out as quickly as you can. Old plants, before you pull them up, cut off any of the new growth at the end, because that will be producing seed virtually straight away. The quicker you can do that, the more likely you will get to a point where you will eradicate it so that only the odd one or two comes up, and then you'll know what to do. As soon as you see it, whip that out. I hope that helps you. Hi Rosie, our standard rose seems to have perished. No leaf, no flower this year, sending out suckers from the base, the part that it's grafted onto. Does this sound like the end of the rose to you? This does sound a little bit as though this is the end, I'm sorry. If it is starting to sucker from where you are, where the rose has been grafted, then the likelihood is that those suckers that you are getting, which are a different colour green, a different leaf, are the rootstock growing, and that means that the top is not going to, so it has succumbed, I'm afraid. They do have a life expectancy, and so I would go for thinking of this as opportunity to take it out, refresh the soil, think about what you want to replace it with and get something else in there, and then make sure when you get a new rose or you get a new plant, feed them well, and off you go, a new opportunity, new plant for the garden. Hi Rosie, I've got ferns growing massively in one of my borders and are really taking over. They're in an awkward position to get at and I'm finding it impossible to dig them out. Any ideas? Thank you. Right, so some ferns, once they get established, really do make great big clumps, and yes, it can be very difficult because they have got what you see on the top you will have underneath, so they've got this really big system. So some ferns, you know, if you've got a top growth of here by here, that's what you've got underneath, and it's a very fibrous growth. They're not technically roots, but it's really big solid fibre, which makes it very, very difficult to be able to lift them out. I would suggest that you reduce the size of the height of the actual fern itself. So when they're growing, just keep on thinning out the fronds that are there so that you haven't got such a massive amount of fern in the way. That way you may reduce the way that they grow a little bit and they may come up less strong the next year, which will be ideal for what I think you're wanting. But it will take 2 or 3 years to do this, but just go at it slowly, just cut them back and thin them out so that they actually look good rather than being really congested. I hope that will help you. I was wondering if you could do a video on the differences between Helianthus, Rudbeckias and Gaillardias. I always get mixed up as they look very similar. Right, so you have Helianthus, which if you think of the common name is sunflowers. You have Rudbeckias, which their common name is black-eyed Susan, but don't get those confused with the climbing vine that is called black-eyed Susan, which is Thunbergia. You've then got Gaillardias, which are known as blanket flowers. Now, actually, the common names in this case do actually help you quite a lot. Helianthus, sunflowers, big, tall, open, big flowers, look like a sunflower, flat centres, smiley faces. That's one way of looking at it. This is not technical botanically at all, but it gives you an instant idea as to what you're looking at. Rudbeckias, flowers are normally like this, so that's the other thing to think of. Helianthus, the flowers are here looking at you, that shape. Rudbeckias are this way, and they have a cone which is black. That's the black eye. Then you get the Gaillardia. Okay, the Gaillardia flower is flat, it's blanket flower. Its petals go down, but its petals have always got a toothing at the edge, whereas the other two are pointed at the end of the petals. So that is a very quick, very easy guide of how, if you look at them and see them in a garden growing, what you have got. I hope that helps you. Hello Rosie, thank you so much for your expert information, detailed explanations. Just subscribe to your channel after the first time of watching. Thank you very much. Can you tell me where I can purchase the hand snippets that you use? Right, so the hand snippets that we use, we keep on getting asked this question, are ARS fruit pruners, and they are the number 300. They're really good, they're fine, the fine-nosed ones, and they're excellent for just chopping, doing cuttings, etc. You can find them online. Right, on your opinion, we're planting out kale seeds or lavender seeds now. Now we're talking about mid-August here, so give this you an eye. So late summer, early autumn. Live in Zone 6 of the USA. First frost is due about October the 28th. Kale is leafy green, withstands cooler temp. Lavender is perennial. I would certainly say to you that you would be perfectly fine sowing both of those. I think with the lavender, you would perhaps need to give it a little bit of protection once you get to the winter, but I have no problem with you setting seed now and trying it, because after all, you may have a date for your first frost, but it may be a little bit earlier, maybe a little later. You have got plenty of time for those seeds to germinate. If they don't germinate this autumn and you've got them covered over, they still have time in the spring to germinate, because seeds will sit there dormantly just going, right, I'm waiting for the right time to just come back up into growth, and that's exactly what you will get with those. So I would go for it. Sow some now, and then if you have success, brilliant. If they don't succeed and you keep them over winter and then they grow, absolutely fine again, but then you've still got a few left to be able to sow in the spring. It's always worth doing them in different stages and different batches. Do not sow everything you've got all at once because the conditions may not be correct. Right, I had a question left on the Propagation House tour video, and this is someone saying, I would love to hear more about your biological controls and how you grow all those plants without chemicals. Do you have any issues with fungus gnats on the heat pads, and why do you use cork specifically? So there's a lot of different questions in there. I don't think I can cover all of those in one thing. So what I will do is what biological controls we actually use and what they are for in our propagation house. So we have a program from a commercial company for our biological control. This has been looked into because they've come and had a look at the tunnels to see what our pest problems are, and we have this control going through the year. We can alter it slightly should we have a problem. So we have aphid control, and we have something called apheline flower, which is 6 different aphid control insects. So they are going to attack 6 different species, as well as being 6 different species of insects themselves. So they will go around and get all sorts of there, because you have black fly, you have green fly, you have white, there's all sorts of different green fly out there. Then we have Hyopsis miles, which is for the fungus gnat. So we do have a biological control for the fungus gnat. And on that point, yes, on the mats themselves, we do get fungus gnat if we've got bare spaces and it is wet and it's starting to get a little bit green, but we do clean it very regularly. And the cork on the top of the trays stops the fungus gnat. Phytoscilus persilius is used for spider mite, so that will get the 2-spotted mite, which is what you might know as red spider mite. So that's the 2-spotted mite, that's going for that. And then we have Encarsia formosa, which are on the cardboard cards, and that is for whitefly. So we get sent all of these controls via the post, and they come in either little files, little boxes. Some of them stay in the files. We open up the ends, they get hung in the greenhouse. Other come in vermiculite, some come just loose, so they can come as larvae. You open up and you just leave it where they are, or you sprinkle it on top of your plant material all around. And the Encarsia, which is the easiest one to do, is on little cards which you just hook on in various different places. So I hope that is answering what the biological controls are. We may come back to some of those other questions you've got in there in another Q&A. Thank you very much for the questions. I'm wondering how to propagate a variegated Nicotiana that sprung up last year in the regular green rootstock. It's not producing seed. I'm wondering if I should try cuttings or some other way to propagate. With variegated plants, it's very, very difficult because they usually don't produce seed, and if they do produce seed, they produce green offspring. The variegation is within the growing stem of that part of the plant. So therefore the only way of reproducing it, if you're wanting a variegated plant, is to be able to take a cutting off it. So you'd have to split it off at the base very, very carefully. You need to stop it flowering and get it growing, and then pot it on. Hopefully you can get it with a bit of root, but try. You may not be that successful. It's always worth a try. Keep it very well protected, because Nicotiana can stay perennial. They're not long-lived perennials. In the UK they tend to die off, and we use them as an annual because they're used as a bedding plant. We do them from seed every year. But you can get 2 or 3 years out of a plant. So it would be worth just trying, taking it off, and then the only way of them producing that plant will be to keep on taking cuttings from it. The seed will not produce variegated plants, if it ever does produce seed. I am a beginner gardener, new to your channel, so I live in northeast United States, and right now struggling with my dry, very shady backyard full of rocks and stones, which makes it very difficult to dig. I wish I could bring you over and so you can see it. I need help. well, we may be able to help you there in the future. I have thought of planting in pots. I have a lawn in poor shape. Oh, and did I mention I have a slope with a retaining wall? I would appreciate any advice, thank you. Gosh, this sounds like you have got a very complicated lot of area going on in the garden. One thing I would say is try and attempt to think, well, maybe I won't have a lawn, maybe I will have a wildflower area which I then walk over. Grow plant material that likes it. So if it's poor stony soil, go and have a look at what will grow and cover that you can then put a mower over the top and you still end up with something that looks green if you want a lawn, that is. Otherwise, think about maybe going into gravel gardening and zera type planting, because that is something that you're going to be needing to look at. With your stony areas and rocky areas where it's difficult to dig, I would start by just putting a load of mulch there, and we're talking about a big layer of mulch, something around about 4 to 6 inches. So that is somewhere between 10 and 20 centimeters depth of mulch, and I would just cover the whole area with that. I would then put something over the top so you don't get too much weed seed blowing into it. So a covering of light material or cardboard or something like that over the top of that, and just allow the mulch to go naturally down into that ground. It will take 2-3 years of that to do it, and leave it unplanted for about 6 months. So it's a good idea to do it now in the autumn, fall for you, and allow it to just go down, and that will really help you in the spring. And then in the spring again, mulch again, and then start planting. Hope that helps with that bit. With your retaining wall and a slope, is there any way that you from the retaining wall can level off and then put another retaining wall so that you're getting terraces? Because that would be much easier for you to be able to manage. I know it sounds like a lot of hard work, but it may be the best way of doing it, because a slope is always quite difficult to look after. Unfortunately, you don't tell me whether it's in the shade or the sun, because that would actually help. We are thinking about doing an online course for people, or an online experience whereby I would be able to give you advice via Zoom, etc. It is in the making. It is a little way off, but it may be something that people would be interested in. I would love to know people's whether people would be interested in that, because it's something we are going to try and develop. In my experience, Sedum Euphorboides azune and Artemisia lactiflora griza both need full sun. In the shade they both fall over. What can I do to get them to stand up in the shade? Okay, so here in the UK, I have used them in shady gardens and I find there is no problem, but I am putting them into drier conditions. I'm not putting them into moist conditions, I'm putting them in drier shade. Therefore, they don't grow as tall, they grow perfectly well, so they're probably half the height that they would normally be. So that is a starting point. Do not give them too much food. And then the other thing you can do, if they are doing that in your shady area, give them the Chelsea chop. Now this is when they're starting to grow, so it may not be May, because they may not be at a point where you can do that. So it's the equivalent of a Chelsea chop. It's basically, as you see them starting to go up, cut them back down, and then they will come up later with slightly lower spikes, and those won't fall over. I hope that helps you. Rosy, thank you for your inspiring content. In our wildlife friendly garden in Northern Ireland, we have an unsightly solid wooden fence, 1 metre 80 east facing. I planted a honeysuckle 2 years ago. Both years it's been badly affected by powdery mildew, has defoliated, never flowered. This year I tried with the European spindle and I'm having the same problem. Can you suggest some climbers or shrubs, possibly evergreen, that might fare better in front of the fence? Thank you. Okay, this sounds like quite a bit of a problem with this. You don't say, I know it may be east facing, you don't say how much light it gets. But for me, one of the best climbers which goes on east facing is Akebia quinata, which is the chocolate vine. Now this can be quite thuggy, which means it would actually be quite good for you. Semi-evergreen has lovely dark purple flowers which have a chocolate perfume on them. It's a vine, it winds itself around, it's actually quite good. The other thing that I think that might work quite well would be a Parthenocissus. Again, that's not evergreen, but it would give you the cover over the fence. So personally, I would try those. But also, if you have a problem and you want other suggestions, ask me another question again and give me an idea of how much sunlight and what type of soil you're actually planting into, because those are key things that I need to know, not just that it's east facing. Okay, thank you for that. Can you please recommend something to put in pots on gateposts in a north facing windy site, North Norfolk, UK? Everything I tried has got battered. Well, this sounds like you're putting them into a really extreme position, and I'm not sure if you're wanting something that is really tall, but in a very exposed northerly wind position, I would always suggest things that are low and ground cover hugging. And if you're there, I would suggest that it's probably also slightly salty air that is bashing these plants, which means that you need to be looking at things which are happy in those conditions. So sea thrift, for an instance, it's not going to be big, or sempervivans will survive in pots like that. So I know they're low and ground hugging, but you can get good colours of them and they will then come through. But that's the only thing I can really think of that would really do against those conditions. All right, thank you very much everybody for sending in the Q&As. Please look out on the community tab for when the next lot of questions will be requested. Hope these have answered all of your questions in the right way. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.